I'm willing to bet that the majority of people listening this morning will at some time or other have been smacked. Now, you might even have been on the receiving end of a cane or a slipper, but attitudes towards corporal punishment have shifted significantly in recent decades. Today, a review of 20 years of studies concludes that smacking doesn't improve children's behaviour. On the contrary, it makes it worse and it can be harmful. Well, the review was led by University College London and involved 69 global studies that followed children over time, mostly in the US. Well, smacking is banned in 62 countries around the world. That includes Scotland, where a smacking ban was introduced in November last year, and a similar ban is due to come into force in Wales in 2022. In England, parents are allowed to smack their children under a reasonable chastisement defence under the Children's Act 2004. It allows smacking as part of a reasonable punishment as long as it doesn't leave a mark such as a bruise or a scratch. The question is, should England be following the lead of Scotland and Wales? That's certainly what this research would suggest. Let's speak to Dr Anja Heilmann, who is from UCL and is the lead author of the study. Good morning.
Good morning.
Also with us is Simon Calvert, who is a spokesperson for Be Reasonable, a group that campaigns against smacking bans. First of all, if you could, Dr Heilmann, just explain to us what your study looked at and the conclusions in greater depth.
Okay, so what we looked at, as you said, was 20 years of research, 69 studies that looked at the effects, the impacts of physical punishment on different child outcomes. And the one that has been studied most are behavioral problems that are directed outwards. So things like aggression, rule breaking, hurting others. So those are the behaviors that probably physical punishment is meant to improve. But actually what we found was really overwhelming evidence that it does the opposite. And what is important to say is that the studies that we included are all studies that followed the same children over time and controlled for initial levels of these behaviors. So it's not that we see these links because these were children who were just had these behaviors in the first place. These effects were controlled for, and over and above, we see that these behaviors worsen over time in children that are physically punished. So it really achieves the opposite of what it is meant to achieve.
Before I bring in Simon, can you give us what the definition was of a smack for the purposes of this study?
Yes. So as you said, most of these studies come from the US, which use the term spanking, and that is understood as hitting children with an open hand on the extremities or maybe the buttocks. Not all studies define the term smacking or spanking, but what we also did is we took great care to exclude studies that had in their definition of physical punishment things like hitting on the head, using an object, use terms such as beating. So we included those severe, that severe end of the spectrum. So what we are talking about, or what we looked at, are these ways of spanking or
so there's quite a wide range there, isn't there, from a tap on a hand all the way through to using an implement and maybe hitting someone around the head. So it's a wide spectrum.
Yes, there is, but what I'm saying is we excluded hitting on the head,
right? Okay,
or using an object that was not included. So we're talking about what you might say, or what you might call normative forms of physical punishment.
Let's bring in Simon, because I introduced you, Simon, as being from a group that campaigns against smacking bans. Just outline your position for us. Simon, can you hear us? The silence would suggest not. We'll try and reconnect with Simon. Some people would say, Anya, that the importance of smacking is not so much the action of smacking, it's providing a deterrent, the fear of smacking. Did that come into your study at all?
We didn't look at the intentions of parents, but if I don't quite follow the idea why you would want to instill fear in a child if you want the child to learn something.
I think the argument is it would be a deterrent. So if a child felt, it's one argument that is put forward, that if a child felt that if they did something was wrong, then they would be smacked, they may therefore behave better to avoid the smack.
Okay, so but if that was the case, if it would work that way, then what we would see in the data would be that children who are physically punished are behaving better than those who are not. But we see the exact opposite, and the evidence is really very clear. So those children that are
You should be able to hear me
experiencing
now.
physical punishment are more likely to exhibit those behaviors that are unwanted.
I think we heard Simon in the background joining us. Hi there, Simon.
Hi, sorry about that.
Not
Problems
at all.
at our end.
No problem, no problem. I was saying that I introduced you as from a group that is against smacking bans. So do you want to outline what your position is on smacking?
Yeah, I mean, we think it should be up to parents. And there's a line in this study which said that parents are not receiving or not believing the message that campaigners would like them to believe, that smacking is harmful and useless. And there's a reason for that, and that's their own experience. Now, I mean, these stories come around about once every 6 months. Dr. Heilmann, Professor Heilmann, Elizabeth Gershoff, others who have a very, clearly defined position, which they're entitled to. They believe that smacking's wrong. They think it should be outlawed. We get a new paper published, another round of headlines telling us that, parents who smack are terrible people. And the fact is that people don't believe it because they know from their own experience. People who were smacked themselves as children by loving parents in strong relationships, who know that their childhoods would not have been better if their parents had been criminalized for something as trivial as tapping them on the back of the hand or on the back of the legs to reinforce a lesson.
We're getting lots of texts in. It might be worth responding to some of these. Simon, there's one here that I'm just looking at. It says, I did smack. It was always about losing control. It stopped when they were too big. It's horrid, but it's true. And that is one argument that is put forward, isn't it? That if you smack, this is actually about a parent losing control.
It is one argument. And look, there's a lot that we can do to help parents and to encourage them to use a range of techniques. But what I would say is, and I say this as respectfully as I can, please don't patronize all parents by telling them that they only ever smack because they lose control. This is part of the problem.
That was just a view of to be fair, that was a view of a listener.
Yes. And that's why I say as carefully as I can. Let's not draw from that the conclusion that that's what all parents do, because it's not. And parents use a range of options. Many parents don't smack. Many parents don't feel the need. Some parents find with the one child it's not necessary, and with another child it is occasionally necessary. It should be left up to parents, because scientists are marvelous and they can tell us many things, but they can't tell us whether smacking should be a criminal offence. And they've done that in Scotland. And one of the first things the Scottish government did was to issue a leaflet saying, if you see a parent smacking a child, dial 999. What a colossal waste of time for the police and the authorities who should be trying to help genuinely abused kids to be wasting their time investigating a family where there's nothing wrong except that mum tapped a toddler on the back of the legs. And how terrifying for that family, for that mother, to face a police investigation over something like that. Because as you indicated, UK law is very clear that if a parent does anything which leaves any kind of mark, anything more than transient reddening of the skin, that's already illegal. And I think that most people think that's the right place to draw the line, not bringing trivial smacks within the ambit of the criminal law.
Well, let's bring Anya back in on this. Anya, do you want to speak to Simon?
Well, we are not looking at the intentions of parents. That's not what we looked at. We looked at the outcomes for children, and the data just disagree with you. So we just see that children who have been physically punished have that increased risk of these behavioral difficulties. So it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And in the best case, it does nothing. But in many cases, it does harm. So I don't know why
there are other scientists who take a different view, of course.
Can I finish? I don't know why parents would want to continue with a practice that doesn't work. And I think parents want to have that information. And previous generations didn't have that information. But now we know, now we have that evidence, and now we can act on that. And children deserve that protection. They deserve the same protection from hitting, from violence that adults have.
Let me read you some text messages that were coming in, and then Simon, by all means, do respond. One here says from Susan, I got the slipper over the front desk for not knowing what 9 times 7 was. I soon learnt my tables and I love maths. I was 7 years old. We need it in classrooms now for discipline so that pupils can learn. John, on the other hand, says hitting children teaches them a lesson that you use violence to get your way, not a lesson we should be teaching children. I wonder, Simon, if you can see if there can be an alternative to smacking. If, for example, a child has been badly behaved, would it be more appropriate to say, I'll take a device off you, or you can't go to football club after school, and actually take things away so that they can think about the consequences of their actions, rather than if they've just been hit, it hurts, and then they move on?
Yeah, of course. I mean, just let me quickly say, there are, of course, scientists who take a different view from Anja Heilmann. So it's not like that, all the science is on one side on this. And yes, as I tried to indicate, good parents have a range of things that they can use to help bring up their kids. Some of those good parents occasionally decide that tapping a child on the back of the hand is the right thing to do in a particular situation. And you shouldn't make them criminal for doing that. We can't allow the sort of narrative that parents who do that are bad parents, that we can't claim that the science has proved that it should be a criminal offence, because science can't prove that. As I say, you look at, the former president of the British Psychological Society, Tommy Mackay, Professor Ellie Lee from Kent, other people, other academics, will take a different view of what the science tells us.
Could you give us an example of when you think it would be appropriate for a parent to smack a child? Because you've said there's obviously a range of tools available to parents. So when do you think it would be an appropriate incident to smack a child?
Well, I mean, that's up to parents to decide. But if a child takes something that belongs to another child, if that's something that the parent has been working on with the child, they've been explaining to them why you shouldn't do that. They've been trying to use other methods to try and help the child to understand that that's a bad thing to do to another person. That parent might conclude, right, on this occasion, and they probably would tell them, explain what's going to happen, tap them on the back of the hand. They give them a hug. And this is the experience of parents today. And it's the experience of us, many of us, when we were kids, of our own parents. And so I come back to the point that we can have a difference of opinion about when and where to smack, or whether you should smack at all. And that's a legitimate debate. We absolutely should encourage parents to be patient with their children, to explain things to their children in a way they can understand, to try and enter into the way their child sees the world so that they might better understand why a child behaves in a certain way. There are lots of things that we can talk about.
Isn't there a danger you're teaching them violence?
Law,
Isn't there a danger you're teaching them violence if you hit them, that they could then go
no more than teaching them theft by taking away their mobile phone? I mean, children and
well, you're not. That's not. But to be fair, Simon, that's not theft, is it? If you clearly say to somebody, "I'm going to take away your phone or your device because you can't use it tonight, so you'll get it back tomorrow, but you can't have it now because of this," that's not theft. Theft is permanently taking it away. But are you not teaching somebody that if you don't get your own way, violence is the way forward?
Well, if you were right about that, then every one of us who was smacked as a child should have turned into a violent adult who uses violence to get our way. But we didn't. We understood what our parents meant by it. And we understood it hopefully in the context of a warm, loving parental relationship. Look, there are all kinds of problems that families face today, all kinds of pressures. And yes, there are some parents who make some terrible decisions. But what Anya Heilmann wants to do is she wants the criminal law to be brought to bear on a particular parenting technique that she disagrees with.